Okay, everybody, we're going to hold for just a moment, make sure that we're live streaming on Facebook as well, and let everyone get in here. So just bear with us for one moment and we will go ahead and start our introductions and all of that. Okay, looks like we're streaming everywhere. Hey, everybody, this is Jeff Martin with Magic City Books. So thrilled to have you here with us for our weekly virtual author event series. We've been doing, about 2 or 3 of these a week for the last year. And it's been a great way to stay connected with all of you and also reach a lot of new people. Of course, on average, we're doing like 120 in-person author events a year pre-COVID. And we didn't know if we'd be able to kind of keep that momentum going and still kind of keep a tether to our audience. And through these events, we've been able to do that. And like I said, reach people that may not have ever been to Tulsa, been to Magic City Books, been to Oklahoma even. And so if you're watching and you're not here, thank you for doing that. It's a cool way to kind of expand our reach a little bit. A lot of fun things coming up. I won't go through the whole long list with you, but I would encourage you to go to our website, magiccitybooks.com, and you can see everything that we have coming up. A lot of stuff this spring that's going to be pretty important stuff. We're coming up on the centennial of the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre, and we're going to be really talking a lot about issues of race and reconciliation, and we've done that a lot anyway, leading the last couple of years. But there'll be more of a focus on that in the spring. So I hope you'll join us for some of those things, but also some lighter fare. We want to kind of create this little bit of a ebb and flow where it's important stuff and then also stuff where we want to escape a little bit. And that's what we're going to be doing tonight. We all need some escape. We don't get enough chances through Magic City to focus on YA books and focus on genre specifically. I'm always thrilled when we have the opportunity to do so. I'm also really always thrilled when we have a guest moderator who can actually handle the heavy lifting, and I can actually just sit back and watch and enjoy with all of you. So I'll go ahead and mention our guest moderator before we begin, and that's Hanna Howard. Hanna is the author of a book that we launched back in August called Ignite the Sun. And I actually worked with Hanna decade plus ago at a bookstore. And I was mentioning to her before, it's pretty cool when you worked with somebody as a bookseller just out of college, and then years later, you get to actually sell their book in your bookstore and launch a new book and that. So really cool to see that journey. So Hanna's going to be our guest moderator tonight. Hanna and Joanna know each other and they've even done events before. This is like Martin and Lewis. They've got this whole thing down. But Hanna's going to be moderating, and you're going to have questions. So Hanna will take your questions, put those in the Q&A, and we'll try to pull some of those while we go and take those. Also, when you're getting the books tonight, and there are more than one, of course, you're going to want to go to the chat function. We'll be talking about, of course, Ignite the Sun, but more specifically, we're going to be talking about Into the Heartless Wood by Joanna Ruth Meyer, our very special guest tonight. And like I mentioned before, we all need an escape. There it is right there. And I think one of the reasons why post-vampire YA books and things have kind of continued to kind of dominate is because there's this inherent need in a reader to kind of get out of our head a little bit, go to a different place, a place that may not even be real. But has those kind of hallmarks of a certain time or a certain place, and that's in some ways the oldest power of narrative that we have. And so, really thrilled to sit back and watch these two great tonight for a conversation. And I will turn it over. I will say thank you to Joanna for joining us from Arizona virtually, and I'll turn it to Hanna to moderate. Thank you both. We're really excited about tonight.
Well, thanks for having us. We're really excited to be here. As Jeff said, I'm Hanna. I'm going to be moderating and kind of guiding our conversation, but we're hoping to just sort of invite you all into a conversation just between Joanna and I about books and the things that we love. Joanna and I have been friends for a number of years now. We met when we were both trying to find a literary agent, and it's been invaluable to have a friendship where our kind of writing passion exists, and that camaraderie that supports and encourages and understands has just been awesome for both of us. So we're excited to have you here tonight, and we're excited for you to join us. And if any questions occur to you during this conversation, please just throw them into the Q&A and we'll get to them. But otherwise, we'll just roll with the things that we've sort of decided to talk about tonight. So Joanna, please tell us about yourself a little bit. Tell us about briefly about Into the Heartless Wood, and then about your other books that people can also find.
Yes, well, hello and good evening, Hannah. Thank you so much for doing this with me. So I am Joanna. I have 4 books out. I should have grabbed them to display their beautiful covers, but I did not think about that until this moment. But Into the Heartless Wood is my 4th book, and it just came out in January. And it is a part gender swapped Beauty and the Beast retelling, part Little Mermaid retelling, if the Little Mermaid happened to be a murderous tree. And it explores my love of the forest and boys with feelings and the complicated plight of a monster who just wants to be human. So I had a lot of fun writing this book, and the cover is green, which is my favorite color. So I was very pleased that it was green. All I've wanted in life is a green book. Yeah. And then my other 3 books, 2 of them are set in the same fantasy world. I got to invent mythology for them. Those are Beneath the Haunting Sea and Beyond the Shadowed Earth. And then my other book is Echo North, which is another fairy tale retelling. And it's a retelling of East of the Sun and West of the Moon, which is kind of like Beauty and the Beast with a quest at the end. So I really like Beauty and the Beast, and I keep dabbling in that fairy tale by accident.
All of Joanna's books are wonderful. So if you are a fantasy reader, if you're a fairy tale reader, if you like young adult, any of those categories, Joanna's books will be a perfect fit for you. So we had like a list of things to talk about. We still do. But as we've been kind of beginning this conversation, I find that I want to just take us in a different direction to begin. So
let's do it.
I want us to talk just briefly about the importance of fantasy to both of us, and particularly why do we write young adult fantasy? I thought, Jeff's point about needing something to get us out of ourselves was good. And I just wanted to kind of unpack that a little more and have us share, because if you're an adult who doesn't read young adult fantasy, you might be curious why you would, or fantasy at all. I think there are a lot of people who maybe wouldn't grab fantasy at their first shot. So let's talk about that a little bit. Why fantasy?
Well, I've always said I live in the real world, and why would I want to read about it? So there's that. I mean, I'm straight up into the escapism. And I also think that, there's a real opportunity to talk about truth and beauty and all of these real world concepts that are sometimes easier to digest and explore in a fantasy setting. And I write young adult books because I love to read them, because I feel like mentally I never grew up. So yeah. So there's some, deep answers in there, and some, a little bit shallow answers too. But yeah, I love the escapism aspect, and I love exploring different worlds, and that feeling that, you really get to go to a different place, and that chance to, work through some ideas and concepts and philosophies that, I don't know, are just a little bit, I think, easier to tackle in a fantasy setting.
Yeah. And I think for myself, easier to understand. I think sometimes fantasy gives me that ability to step back a little bit, but also to filter. Like for me, fantasy becomes this lens that I can like see and comprehend and understand better something real because I met it in a fantasy context. And so,
Yeah.
that for me has always, I think, been true of fantasy and fairy tale, that it translates somehow, these sort of realities that are hard. Yeah. And, YA, like, what's more interesting than figuring out who you are for the first time, like that
Exactly.
is what drives young adult lit, is that discovery of self. So, yeah.
Yep. 100% agree.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about Into the Heartless Wood. We heard the pitch briefly. And by the way, guys, this book is so good. I read it. I was one of the perks of having really talented authors as friends is that you often get to read their books before they're on the shelves. And so I got to read Heartless before it came out, and I think probably my husband gets annoyed with me when I'm reading Joanna's books, because I'm just like always like, oh, this is so good. Oh, shut up, Joanna. This is so good. So Into the Heartless Wood is so good. You should definitely read it. Tell us, Joanna, about your inspiration for the book.
Yeah, so I live in Mesa, Arizona, which is in the greater Phoenix area. And anyone who talks to me for more than 5 minutes will know that I despise the desert with a fiery passion. With as much of a fiery passion as the summer despises me. But the good thing about Arizona is if you drive 2 hours north, you get to drive up a mountain, and there is a lovely pine forest up in a place called Prescott. I lived there for a little bit when I was growing up, and my husband's family has a cabin up there. And so I'm not going to say that I married him for the cabin, but I mean, it was a perk for sure. But anyways, we go up there as much as possible, especially during the summer, to beat the heat a bit. And one of my very favorite things to do is to sit out on the porch and just stare at trees. And the pines are so tall and stately, and they just wave in the wind, and just the sound of the wind. And there's all these ravens up there, which is kind of funny, and it's almost creepy, but not really. But so they're always caw, caw, and the trees are just swaying, and it's just, you feel like you're in a different world up there. You must understand, my normal world is, cactus and dust and sunlight. So it truly is a different world for me there. Anyways, so it often happens that I'm up there in the summer, and I'm working on books. I think I've worked on Shadowed Earth, Heartless Wood. I don't think I worked on my other 2 up there because they were already written by the time the whole publishing machine got started. But anyway, so I was up there at one point writing Beyond the Shadowed Earth, and I was looking at the trees, and an idea popped into my head, and my mind was what would be very interesting is tree sirens. And I was like, yes, mind, that would be very interesting. And I jotted it down in the notes folder on my phone to, file away for later. And then I think it was probably a different trip. I was reading a book called Hunted by Megan Spooner, which is a Beauty and the Beast retelling. And it's set in this Russian world, and it's fabulous. Highly recommend it. And I was thinking about the idea of Beauty and the Beast, and how I probably would never write a Beauty and the Beast retelling, because I'd sort of flirted with it when I was writing Echo North. And so I kind of filed that away. And then I had this conversation with my husband about the concept of a gender swapped Beauty and the Beast, and whether that would work. Because in my husband's words, he said it would take a very special boy to fall in love with a monster, because most men are shallow, which I thought was funny and darling of him to say. But so I filed that away, and it kind of all came together like idea seeds do. And the last piece of the puzzle is, again, back up north in Prescott. the neighbors across the street, they have an observatory. So there's just this house with this observatory in the middle of the forest, which I just found very inspiring. And so I began to think about, like a boy astronomer, and could he be the special boy who would fall in love with like a tree monster girl? And then that is kind of where it all came from. And I bought a notebook. I always buy a new notebook when there's a story brewing, because I like to brainstorm by hand. But yeah, so that's kind of where the inspiration and where the story came from.
I love it. Yeah, I love Joanna's love for trees, because it like breaks my heart that she's such a tree-ish person who has to live in the desert. So I want to skip a little bit around in our sort of pre-planned list of topics and talk about, like, because I think one of Heartless's I don't know, biggest points of allure is the beautiful dual point of view chapters that you have. You have chapters from both the boy's perspective and the tree siren's perspective. So I want, without spoilers or anything, I want you to talk just a little bit about that, and what, if you won't brag on yourself, I will brag on you, but what is beautiful and unique about the way you've laid out their chapters?
I love the challenge of writing in two perspectives. It's really interesting to, choose which scene gets to be told by which character. Obviously, if they're in, separate locations, that kind of chooses for you. But it was really fun to tell half of the story from Owen's perspective. And he's this just very like nerdy, quiet, soft cinnamon roll of a boy. And he looks after his sister, and he like cooks for his sister and his dad, and he takes care of the house. And so it was kind of fun to give the Belle character in Beauty and the Beast, but as a boy, and to kind of give him these traditionally like feminine kind of like roles, but to see how like he interacted with them. So I love him to death. And then on the flip side, I love my Tree Sirens chapters, because it was a really interesting writing challenge to put myself in the head of a character who started out life as a tree. And so she's not human. And I had a lot of fun coming up with, tree and growth and like nature metaphors, to have her like view the world through that lens. And as the drafts evolved, my editor and I realized that the first few of Siren's viewpoints, they needed to be structured in a different way than Owen's chapters. And so her sections start out very kind of almost free verse-y. So it's sort of like disjointed, like stream of consciousness type of poetry almost. And so that was like a really fun contrast between her scenes and Owen's scenes, and keeping to that sort of like poetry-ish format while still like painting the correct scene and relaying all the correct information. So that was a really interesting challenge to write a book. And yeah, I loved both of their perspectives, but Siren's I think were especially fun to write.
Yeah, they're fun to read too. So did you talk about, I wonder if, I don't know, maybe even fantasy readers wouldn't expect this, but fantasy is not off the hook when it comes to research. There's still a lot of work. Joanna and I often joke about sort of our Google searches and what it is that we were either looking up or finding information on, or finding synonyms for whatever. And so there's a lot of that goes into fantasy writing. Would you talk a little bit about what you researched for this book and where it took you?
Yeah. So Into the Heartless Wood is set in a sort of pseudo Wales-ish type of a place. All the names are Welsh inspired. And it started with the names. When I'm in the early stages of writing a book, coming up with names is really hard, unless every once in a while a name like just comes with the story idea. But otherwise, it's almost like you have to send yourself on this treasure hunt to find the correct name, because some names just do not feel right. And so early on, I was drawn to the name Owen, which I looked up. I love this site behindthename.com, which tells you all the origins of names, the different like nationalities and where they come from and everything. And so the name Owen is Welsh. And so then I go off on this rabbit trail of looking at other Welsh names. And I came upon siren, which means star in Welsh. And everything kind of snowballed from there. So all of the characters and all of the countries and cities and kingdoms and stuff are Welsh words. And they're not very clever. So if you look them up, you're like, oh, you named this character Branch, and this character is named Enemy, and this character is named Sword or something. But it was fun to, you know, look them up. I started on Google Translate. Who hasn't, you know, gone off on the rabbit trail of Google Translate? And then I eventually found this lovely Welsh English dictionary, which is really fun because you could look up words in English and find their, you know, their Welsh counterpart, which is what a dictionary will do for you. So that was really like kind of fun, and I got to research Welsh food and that kind of thing. And then a big part of the book is Owen is an astronomer. And whenever I'm writing the first draft of a book, I don't like to bog myself down with research. So I enter this zone where I just like make stuff up and move on and leave yourself a note for, you know, your future self to deal with later. So I just made stuff up in the first draft, and then I was like, I should probably read enough about astronomy so that I would sort of maybe a little bit know what I'm talking about, or at least be able to like fake it enough that it's just not completely wrong. So I got, let's see, Backyard Night Sky, and definitely what I needed is The Complete Idiot's Guide to Astronomy. So that was kind of fun to research. And then I always like to pick a time period to like sort of pseudo set my book in. I love historical fantasy and historical fiction, but I'm not brave enough to actually do it because I do not trust my research skills enough. But I always do like to choose a time period to base like the technology and the clothing and like all of that kind of thing on. And so Heartless is set in like 1899, 1900, like clothing and technology wise. So we've got a train, and Owen gets a job at a telegraph station. And so there's like those little glimmers of technology in there, which is kind of like an interesting contrast to all these like very fantastical, magical things that were going on. But yeah, so those were the big main pieces of research that I did for the book.
Yeah, that's so fun. It's a little steampunk, I think.
Yeah.
That meld. Yeah. Would you, at this point in our evening, how would you feel about reading a little bit of Into the Heartless Wood for us?
I would feel pretty good.
Okay.
So the first part of the book, not to give too much away, but one thing leads to another, and Owen and siren sneak out at night to hang out together. And this is one of those scenes. I'm being a rebel and not reading from the beginning. I'm reading from page 118.
Nice.
So here we go. So and siren is very curious about the human world. So Owen brings her things to show her. So that's kind of setting us up here. I bring star charts and books, the astrolabe from the observatory, a pair of my mother's shoes I find stuffed in the back of a closet. She doesn't even try the shoes, just shudders and hands them back to me. How would I feel the earth, she demands, as if I really should have thought about that before offering her something so offensive. But the charts and the books and trinkets fascinate her. She wants to learn to read. I teach her the alphabet and leave her newspapers and a few books. Within a week, she can read simple sentences. In another week, complex ones. Every day before dawn, I sneak back into the house to sleep a few hours before dragging myself up in time to go to the telegraph office. The schedule is grueling and unsustainable, but I can't give up my nights with siren. I'm terrified every one will be my last, that the Gwithin will tear a hole in Saren's guarding trees and devour us both, that my father will catch me sneaking over the wall. But I can't stop. I don't want to stop. It's been nearly 3 weeks since Siren raised her screen of trees around her hill and I played my mother's cello. Not even Marilyn Griffith can distract me anymore. She makes a point to talk to me every afternoon when she arrives for her shift, her dark hair pinned up in a bun or sometimes loose and curly about her shoulders. She comes in on her day off and asks me to have dinner with her at the inn. Once I would have leapt at the chance, wishing I'd been brave enough to ask her myself. But now I give her request hardly a thought before I politely decline and walk home, because Siren is waiting. I've almost begun to think that it will always be this way, that I will spend every night for the rest of my life amidst trees and stars. Tonight, I lug Mother's phonograph out of the garden shed where I hid it before Father got home. I heft it carefully over the wall, then through the tunnel of branches and up the hill. I'm breathing hard by the time I lay it down in the grass, unlatch the top of the case and remove it. Sweat runs into my eyes and prickles between my shoulder blades. Siren watches as she always does, expectant and curious. I fit the horn into the phonograph, then carefully slide a hollow, wax-covered cylinder onto the mandrel, a cylindrical component of the phonograph that's made of solid metal. I turn the crank on the side of the box, winding the device up, then set the stylus onto the wax cylinder. Music blooms from the phonograph's horn. Siren leaps back in shock, and I straighten up, pleased with myself. It's a partial recording of a symphony Mother brought with her from her university days. Violins and cellos swell into the night, chased by a lone clarinet and the kettle drum's pulsing heartbeat. Siren is transfixed. Magic, she whispers at last. This is magic. I glance at the screen of trees around us and shake my head. Not magic, it's music and science. It's beautiful. I smile, forcibly ignoring my jittering nerves. I hold out my hand. Will you dance with me, Siren of the Wood? She tilts her head. I do not understand. I'll show you. She takes my hand, her skin rough, smooth, sharp against mine. I pull her near me, gingerly resting my other hand on her waist. Leaves whisper over my fingers, soft as rose petals, soft as a whale's ruined hair ribbon. Beneath, smooth silver skin. I hardly dare speak. To the time of the music, see? It's a waltz, the lilting rhythm easy to feel, a weighty downbeat, 2 lighter upbeats, again and again. She seems almost instinctually to understand. She moves as easily as the wind coiling round us, a part of the wood, a part of the waltz. The hand not folded in mine finds my chest, her knobby fingers splayed out, tiny leaves sprouting up from her knuckles. Your heart beats, she says, just as mine does. I take my hand from her waist and brush my fingertips over her heart. I feel her pulse, erratic, quick. Her eyes search mine as we dance on the hilltop, and I wonder what questions burn inside of her, in the hollow of the soul she claims she does not have. I move my hand back to the safer residence of her shoulder, but my eyes never leave her face. The phonograph scratches and screeches as it comes to the end of the cylinder. It's only able to play for 4 minutes. For a moment more, we keep dancing to the music of the wood, the grass, the sky. We stop abruptly, mid-stride. We break apart. I feel strange and small, less than myself. Does she feel this way too? Mutely, I kneel beside the phonograph, move the stylus back to the beginning of the cylinder, turn the crank. The symphony starts over, crackly and beautiful in the summer night. I rejoin Siren, and this time it's her who reaches out her hand to me, her asking if I want to dance. We do, again and again. I restart the symphony 5 times, 6, and then it doesn't matter anymore, and we don't need music to dance. We're still dancing when dawn comes, and the rosy flush of it is reflected in her silver face. And this is Siren. His heart beats beneath my fingers as the music spins into the night like spider silk, and I never want it to stop. I live for these nights, for stars on a hill, for Owen's gentle heart. I hate the days, my sister's shrieking music, blood and death and soul upon soul taken from my mother, power for her war against the eater. But I cannot have the nights without the days. Dawn comes. He slips away. I wonder if this will be the day that I lose him, or if we will have another night under the sky.
Yay. I love it. I love it. Thank you for reading.
Absolutely.
So we've talked about the book itself. We kind of have thought that a part of this book conversation, books as an event conversation, what maybe doesn't get talked about all that much is the behind the scenes aspect of publishing in general. And so I wonder if you would want to talk at all about your writing process. And then if we have time, we can get a little bit into the publishing process and what that's like. So yeah, let's start with, where do you begin when you're writing a book? And then where does it take you?
Sounds good to me. So I mentioned part of this earlier, but my stories start with ideas. And usually I need more than one idea for a story. So I was telling you the little germs that became Heartless Wood eventually. But when I feel like I have enough ideas gelling that I just have this feeling, I'm a feelings person. Yep. So are you. I have this feeling that a book is brewing. And so I buy a notebook because I always like an excuse to buy a notebook. And then I love to brainstorm in a notebook, and I like to have one notebook per book because, again, excuse to buy a notebook, So I'll do a bunch of brainstorming in my notebook. I will, write down the initial ideas, write down, my thoughts of where they might be going. I probably at this point, I'll start searching for names. I'll start searching for names in my notebook before I do, much plotting. But I'll just do brainstorming. And when I feel like I have sort of maybe a story in there, I will do a very, very, very basic outline of stuff that happens at the beginning, stuff that happens in the middle, and stuff that happens at the end. And if I have that, and I know enough about my characters, and I have a couple of names to hang on to, then I will start my outlining process. I like to do this method called the Snowflake Method. You can Google it online, but it was designed by this mathematician, which I am not at all. But it does a really good job of helping you organically grow your ideas. It starts you off by summing up your whole novel in one sentence, and then slowly you expand it more and more and more until you have a 4-page synopsis and then a scene by scene outline. I am a very open-ended, fly by the seat of my pants type of a person. So I would love to just start writing and let the wind take me where it will, but I can't write that way. I have to outline every single scene or I get just horribly stuck and I stop writing. So it kills my soul a little bit, but I have to make the plan or I can't write a book. But my, loosey-goosey, impulsive nature still makes itself known because I don't force myself to follow the outline that I have made. So sometimes I will follow rabbit trails. Like with the book I'm writing right now, I'd outlined a certain thing. And once I got there in the book, it just was not working. And which wound up my main character falling in love with the wrong boy, which I was fine with. So I'm still dealing with the consequence of that choice though in revising it to make it seem like that was, the original plan.
Yeah.
So once I've outlined it all, then all you have to do is write it, which is kind of fun, but a little dreadful. Especially when you have a few published books under your belts and you go back to the drafting process, it can be kind of shocking, because the last thing you worked on was this very highly polished version of your story, and now you're back to like you're just like making mud castles and they look terrible. It is not great, but you just got to get like enough there that you can work with it in later drafts. Yeah. So sometimes I will let people read my rough drafts if I need, just some kind of, outside opinions. Usually I don't let anybody read my books until I've put them through 2 drafts myself.
Yeah.
Which is what just happened with this last book that I'm working on. So I sent draft 2 to my editor and she sent me, her edit letter and everything. And so now I'm working through draft 3. And I seem to need at this point 4+ drafts to get a book where it needs to be, as opposed to like 10 for my debut.
I feel that.
Whew. So that's kind of how the process goes for me writing wise. What about you, Hanna?
Yeah, so I've only got 1 published title under my belt, and I'm working on one right now that I hope will go places. But I had, a very similar experience in coming back to the drafting table after, that debut, man, I would say this is probably a pretty common experience for people. If it's, the book you've been working on yourself for a long time and you get an agent with it, well, man, you're going to work on it with your agent for a long time. And then you're going to work on it with your editor for a long time. And so, the first book I wrote after Ignite the Sun was 2 summers ago now, right? I guess that was before I sold Ignite. But it was like, man, it was a mud castle. And I hope that what I'm working on right now is maybe less muddy, but I do a kind of an amalgamation of some different styles of drafting. I like the Snowflake Method, and I also love Save the Cat. If you guys haven't heard of Save the Cat, it's a book that, well, this is the Writes a Novel version, but it was originally a screenwriting book by a man named Blake Snyder. And it kind of just like takes what we instinctively know about storytelling and breaks it down into like a format that you can like understand when you're trying to create a story. And it uses beats, which are like scenes kind of. But anyway, I think it's a wonderful resource. So I do a kind of cross between snowflaking and beat sheet. But yeah, it's just like it's a different animal to draft than it is to revise with a publishing professional. So for you, like, because you are working on number 5. Do you find, I don't know, how does it feel different when you start to work on a revision with your editor than how it feels when you're just working on even a revision by yourself? What would you call the difference there?
That's an interesting question. I don't know how to answer that exactly. It's really funny because, I've been through this process a lot of times now, but it feels like hard and new.
Yeah.
With every single book, because every single book is different. So even though like I know the process, it's like I don't know the process with this particular book.
Yeah.
Because they all have different strengths and different weaknesses and different, plot holes. And
yeah.
I feel like each one is just a different experience.
Yeah.
I know when I was writing Beyond the Shadowed Earth, it was my first book that I wrote under contract. So I sold it on like 3 sample chapters and a synopsis, which is great. But then I had to write the whole book after that. And that was just like a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
I felt like I was under a magnifying glass the entire time I was writing it. And so once I finished that one, I was like, I don't want to do that again.
Yeah.
And so with Heartless, I actually I wrote the entire rough draft just on my own, just for me. Before I think I'd pitched the concept to my agent. But I wanted to just have an entire draft under my belt before I sold it. Feel more confident that way. Not like I think I can maybe do it, but I already did it, you just have to revise it.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of back to, writing this book that I'm working on right now under contract. At least I have, 2 drafts under my belt, and I'm finally making headway with the third. But yeah, I think just working on a book in general after you've already published, you just have a lot of voices in your head. You hear your editor being like, I think that's too many dialogue tags, and you need to watch your filter words. And then of course you think about, what are the Goodreads reviewers going to think about this book? And are they going to eviscerate me here and for this reason, so I think the main difference is just you're just so much more aware that the book doesn't belong just to you.
Yeah.
And you feel this responsibility to, I don't know, make it good enough.
Yeah.
Make it good enough for more than just you,
Right. Yeah. Does that ever change what, I don't know. Obviously it changes what you do, at least on a micro level, because, if you're hearing your editor say, watch these words or whatever, that's going to impact the way you write. But do you ever make narrative choices because you think this will make people happier, but maybe you wouldn't have done it that way for yourself?
Oh, that's a good question too. I know one of the things I'm working on in this draft is making a change because something that was happening in this book was too similar to something that happened in the book that it's a companion novel to. So stuff like that. I do think even under all the layers, I am still writing for myself.
Yeah.
So it's interesting working with an editor, because I feel like some people get the idea that they tell you stuff that you have to do and you have to do it, but that's a lot more of a give and a take.
Yeah.
So 90% of the time, after my initial be like, well, what are you even talking about? I'll be like, okay, yes, you're right, and I see what you mean, and yes, I will do that, and yeah, you're a genius, you're right, I'm wrong. And then the other 10% of the time, it's almost my editor sees a problem and she offers a solution, and I do not like the solution, but it's I have to dig to see what problem, what is the problem here.
Yeah.
And then I will see and recognize that problem and offer a different solution to that problem.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a really interesting working relationship.
Yeah.
And it's really fun. And I feel like in some ways, you almost get forced to be more creative than you would be on your own.
Yeah.
Because there's some things that you don't see,
Yeah.
And so yeah, it's really interesting, challenging process for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And especially for, I think, people who maybe would, I think you and I are both this way, prefer to work solo in a sense.
Yeah.
We have our ideas of what a thing should be. And it feels sometimes I think can feel like co-authoring with someone. When they have an idea that they think should be kind of the way it is, and you have your own idea of how you think it should be. But if it's not a point that you're hugely convicted is what the book is supposed to be about, or, if it's kind of a more trivial thing, then yeah, you kind of do have to take into account what someone else thinks. And that can be really hard for independent creatives. But yeah, also helpful because like you said, there are lots of stuff that you just can't see by yourself and that you need someone else's input to bring to light.
Yeah, I thought it was especially fascinating with my debut, because like you were saying, you work on it so many times, to get to the querying process. And then you have to revise it again for your agent and for your editor. And I felt, especially when I was revising it with my agent, that even though it had been through so many drafts and I'd worked on it so much, that like with her input, and it changed like quite a lot. But I felt like in the end, it was more the story that it was meant to be in the beginning. And I couldn't get it there by myself, And so it took her, insights and editorial, to like get it there.
Yeah, I felt that way too when I first started working with my agent. Yeah, it's crazy though. It's a really strange process, I think, the book writing process.
Yes, it really is.
Okay, well, we're running out of time, or we're almost out of time. I don't need to call it running out of time. So the last thing that we're going to do, unless anyone has any questions, and if you do, please fire them away, is a lightning round. And this is just that I have a bunch of either or questions that I'm going to fire very quickly at Joanna. And she is not going to think, she's not going to ponder. She's just going to gut reaction answer the question. So,
okay, this is gonna be scary for everyone.
It's gonna be wonderful. You ready?
Yeah.
Okay, birch tree or violets?
Birch tree.
Fantasy or fairy tale?
Fairy tale. It's not a fair question.
Piano or guitar?
Piano.
Yeah. Audiobook or ebook?
Ebook.
Paperback or hardcover?
Paperback.
Nice. Young adult or middle grade?
Young adult.
Yep. Princess or peasant?
Ooh, princess.
Nice. Hero or villain?
Hero.
Yeah. Snow or rain?
Rain.
Nice. Castle or cottage?
Cottage.
Yeah, man. Me too. David Tennant or Matt Smith?
David Tennant.
Yeah. Dragon or unicorn?
Unicorn.
Nice. Fire powers or water powers?
Ooh. Fire powers.
Nice. Wind powers or earth powers?
Wind powers.
Epic or quiet?
Quiet.
Hobbit or elf?
Oh man. I'm gonna say elf just because I feel like there'd be more reading material.
That's true. That's true. Sweet or savory?
Sweet.
Old or new?
Old.
Nice. Walk or run?
Walk.
Yeah. And then this one is just to give us a quick segue into our favorite topic, coffee or tea?
Tea.
Tea. We love tea, and we haven't really talked about it tonight, but we're both drinking tea, and it's
Yes, we are.
the best. This is Yorkshire Gold, I think. What do you got going over there?
I have decaf Earl Grey because I'm an old lady and I can't drink caffeine after like 4 p.m.
Yeah, I guess mine is decaf as well.
That's good.
We are, pretty out of time.
We're gonna do the
oh yes,
giveaway.
I forgot about the giveaway. Okay, so okay, really quickly. Oh, do we have time? We're gonna do it anyway. If you wouldn't mind putting in the comments a number between 1 and 250.
Yes.
Between 1 and 250. Joanna is going to give away 1 copy of Into the Heartless Wood along with an art print of the beautiful siren to 1 lucky winner. And the closest guess to the number that Joanna has already written down before this Zoom will win this copy of Heartless. So go ahead and put your guesses into the chat and we will, hook you up.
Yes, we will. And I will personalize the book to you too, if you would like.
Yeah. And then while they're doing that, Joanna, tell people what they can expect from you next.
Yes, so the book that I'm currently working on is called Wind Daughter, and it's a companion novel to Echo North. It's about the North Wind's daughter who has to go on a quest to claim her father's power and keep the world from unraveling into nothingness.
Yeah.
So that's out next year. I don't have a pub date yet. And it will depend on when I get this revision done, what that pub date is. So, but yeah, look for that.
Yeah, you guys want that on your list. I've only read 11 chapters of it so far, but it's phenomenal. And if you haven't read Echo North, which is its companion, you want that on your list too, because it's so good. So good. Okay, if everybody's got their numbers in, everybody got their numbers in? Going once, going twice, going 3 times. All right, drum roll, please. What number did you write down? 157.
157.
Oh man, it looks like Jacqueline Metcalf is our winner. Lucky Jacqueline. Cool.
All right.
Thanks for coming, everybody. We had a lovely time chatting with you all. Joanna, anything else you want to say tonight to these lovely Tulsans?
Just thanks for having me. One day I will come there in person. Can't wait.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just been lovely chatting with you, Hannah.
It's been lovely chatting with you too. Thanks, Magic City. You guys are amazing and we love you.
Yes. Oh, and there are signed book plates at Magic City for Heartless Wood. So you can go in and order your copy.
Yeah. So if you order from Magic City, it will basically be a signed book, even though it will be on the sticker book plate in. And if you want to order or buy this book, which is my book, Ignite the Sun,
you do. Yes.
I would be happy to sign it for you. Just tell Magic City that you want that and I will come do it. So thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Hannah. Thanks, Magic City. Thanks, guys.